Hello, guys and gals. This is part 11 of our reading of Guinevere by Sharan Newman. Now, I remember this book was sad. Now, when I initially read this book, that was before my mom died. So I kind of got emotional in the last one. I'm sorry. Just that sometimes things hit me now that she's gone that normally wouldn't, and I'm going to power through this. It's just kind of a challenge still. Anyways, we'll be reading from Guinevere, Sharan Newman. This is part 11, and we're going to go over the copyright information. It is copyright 1981 by Sharan Newman, and I have Sharan Newman's written permission to read this on my channel. And I really appreciate that. In the last episode, Gwaelin found out that all three of her sons had died to Saxons. The Saxons had killed her sons, burnt them beyond recognition, and so everyone's coping with that. And Guinevere doesn't know yet. So we're going to see what happens. Kate, Leodegrance shouted. Gwendolyn didn't even start at the noise. She was back in her nightmare, but Kate was there at once. He had not gone back to his work in the stables, but lurked near the door, hoping to be of some further assistance, longing to show his loyalty and love, and perhaps also his ability. Leodegrance regarded him with affection. A fine lad, he thought. I remember his birth. It was the same winter as Gwendolyn was carrying Mark. A stab of pain caught him, and he quickly spilled forth his errand. Guinevere is somewhere still out in the fields or woods. Kate, she went for a walk some time ago. She's probably on her way home now. Will you find her before someone else tells her about her brothers? Don't say anything except that I was worried about her. Bring her to me at once. Can you find her? Yes, I will, Kate answered. The soldier, again, he held his body proudly as he walked out. But Guinevere was already there. She had felt something wrong, even through her communication with the unicorn, perhaps because of it. Vaguely disturbed and annoyed at having her first afternoon with him spoiled, she had hurried towards home. The field workers had seen her, but turned their backs as they saw her approach. They were not working, just standing or leaning on their tools. Before she crossed the creek, she could hear the sound of wild lamentation from the villa. As she rushed past all the people, they would stop their sobbing a moment and stare at her. But no one spoke. The noise was terrifying. It came from every corner and pulsed against Guinevere's skin as she ran through the rooms, too confused and frightened to speculate the reason for it all. She came at last to her parents' door just as Kate was leaving. She never forgot the sight. Gwaelin lying in bed and her hair tangled, her face streaked with tears, staring at nothing, and beside her, Leodegrance hunched brokenly, his head in his hands. Mother, Guinevere called. Father, what has happened to her? Tell me. Leodegrance raised his face to answer her, but at her voice, Gwendolyn rose and stretched out her arms. My last baby, Guinevere, come to me. I must hold you. I must know I have one child left. Guinevere went to her and held her, feeling strange to be comforting her mother, who had never needed anything from her before. It was long afterwards that she finally understood what had happened. In the next few days, the whole makeup of the household changed. The fosterlings were all sent home. Their going made little difference to Guinevere at first, for she had little to do with them. But after they left the villa, the villa was quieter, and many of the servants began to leave too, until eventually only a dozen or so of the oldest or most devoted remained. Gwendolyn slowly forced herself back to life. 20 years of responsibility saved her. It was her duty to tend to the household, to see that everyone was cared for. Her movements were not as sure, her speech less decisive. Sometimes she would suddenly pull in her breath as if struck, but she survived. Leodegrance worried her. In the first hours of anguish, he had been too busy giving orders and arranging matters to stop and let his grief out. Now he refused to. He immersed himself in estate problems, took inventories, planned repairs, sent messages to Cador and Merlin. so incessantly that most of the horses were usually gone. He pushed himself even every waking minute, and then slowly fell into an exhausted sleep, almost a coma, from which he awoke unrested but determined to go on. He spoke only of business and turned away from every sympathizer, even his wife. His energy was constant and frantic, like a bonfire determined to burn itself to extinction. Finally, one night, near the end of summer, Gwendolyn found him in her dressing room. He sat alone in the twilight, slumped over, and so still that she feared he was dead. But as she approached, he spoke. His voice was dull and blurred with tears. "Our sons are dead," he said. "They are gone, and Rome is gone. We are living in a mausoleum, each clinging to our familiar sarcophagus. We have lived out our lives for nothing more than to be the last of our race." He raised his voice, more life coming into it. "I'm sick of those platitudinous callers who tell us not to worry, for our boys are in heaven." Heaven. What are they to do in heaven? Sing psalms? They are soldiers, fighters. There is no need of them in heaven. Are there armies in God's country? Is even he struggling to hold on to the skies? Bah! I didn't raise my sons for the glory of heaven. I raised them for Rome. I'll hear no more of heaven and the mercy of God. I followed the new religion. And what has it given me? I got nothing, and I'll get nothing, and I'll give nothing back. God doesn't care for me. What with all the talk of love, I haven't even been given comfort. What has God given us to help bear this blow? Gwendolyn went to him and knelt at his feet, embracing him fiercely. "Each other, my dearest. We have each other, now that you have come back to me." For the first time since that awful day, he looked at her. "I thought for a time that you would die, too," he whispered. "You are a great gift. If I were to lose you, I would truly believe I was in hell, for I would certainly have nothing left." Gently she helped him up and led him to bed. There they found such comfort as the living can give each other. Everyone praised Guinevere during this hard time. She was melancholy but not maudlin. She wept tastefully whenever her brothers were mentioned. She was considerate of everyone, devoted to Flora, who was still bedridden and did not seem to know any of them. She dutifully stayed near her mother, except for a brief time each day when she was sent alone to the forest for exercise. "Poor dear," the maids clucked. "She doesn't want us to see her cry. Let her go. No one would harm such a child." She kept repeating to herself, "My brothers are dead, my brothers are dead. The Saxons killed them. Matthew will never tease me again or sweep me up on his horse for a ride. John won't tell me any more legends about the stars, and Mark will never sing to me or kiss me good night." But she couldn't sense the finality of their lives, only the ending of something in hers. She had never seen a dead person. She only knew of battles from sagas and Harper's tales. It didn't occur to her that Matthew would never ride a horse, nor John see the stars, nor Mark sing to anyone else. Sing to anyone again, rather. Vaguely she felt that they were still doing those things, but without her. She resented them for not returning, so when she wept against the unicorn's flank, it was for her, for the sudden emptiness in her own life, not the destruction of theirs. Being with the unicorn soothed her without question or demands. It was always there, waiting for her, no matter what time she was able to get away. It told her stories of things she didn't understand. It knew nothing of the world of men except its part in the pattern of capture and death. But it knew how the trees prepared for the winter and the celebration of the woodland made with the coming of spring. It told her of how the earth repaid the sacrifices of battle blood by growing all the more lush and green the following year. It knew the tunes the stars played deep on a winter night, and even the first notes of the aubade sang by the mountains to the sun chariot in ancient times. All this lulled Guinevere and rested her aching heart. She had not fully cast her lot with humanity, and was unaware that she had the choice of becoming one of those immortal creatures the unicorn spoke of, or one like those who followed Giraldus. She came closer to becoming one that summer than she ever would again, until the end. But she wasn't aware of the decision, and so let others make it for her. Chapter 9. It seemed a mockery for summer to be so beautiful that year. The rain and the sun combined for what was certain to be one of the best harvests in many seasons. Gwynland and Leodegrance spent only superficial interest on it. It was enough for them if they could get up each morning, dress, and accomplish one more day without succumbing to their own despair. After the first vicious tide of grief had subsided, they spoke no more of it. By mutual consent, their conversation was mundane to the point of sterility. "May I have my blue beads, dear?" "Of course. Will there be guests to dinner?" "I think not. I have heard that Podius and his family are emigrating. Is that so?" "Yes. The old sot complained that he can no longer get decent wine here, so he is going back to Gaul to see if he can raise his own. The fool. Wait until he discovers that grapes do not grow already fermented in the cask. Not many neighbors left to come to dinner." "It doesn't matter. I'm not in the mood for much company any more." Abruptly, "I must go check the horses. The roan mare has a sore on her left hind foot, and it isn't healing well." "Yes, I must hurry myself. I really should be sure. The maids have cleaned the dining hall properly. Things have been lax with them ever since Flora has been ill." Ever so carefully they stepped around the open wounds, averting their eyes from the festers. Everyone followed their own pattern until the whole household felt as if it was involved in some complicated ritual dance, where one missed beat would bring catastrophe. And the center about which this dance revolved was Guinevere, never a part of the pattern, but always the focus, an object of caution and concern. She spent a part of every day with her unicorn now that the weather was warm. Constant association with it had left a sort of aura about her. Spending so much time with a creature of fantasy gave her an otherworldliness and a serene attitude that half frightened those around her. "It's not natural," a stableman flatly declared one day. "She doesn't seem human, that one." "What are you saying?" A housemaid answered indignantly. "She's as kind and gracious as can be. Grows more like her poor dear mother every day. Sure, she smiles at you and asks after your health, but do you think she sees you? Look at her eyes sometime instead of at the floor. They give me the shudders. What do you want from her? To kiss the hem of your robe? A smile and a friendly word aren't enough for your excellency? If her eyes bother you, it may be your own guilty conscience looking back at you. You're all addled by that girl. You think she's as pure as rainwater. Look how everyone lets her run off to the forest any time she pleases, without a guard or even a maid. She stays there for hours and comes back smiling, like she's seen a vision, but nobody asks her where she goes or who she meets. She's probably got a lover from some peasant family and is laughing at you all for not seeing it. Irk." Penserna had entered behind him and now grabbed him by the collar. He was almost frothing with righteous anger. "Get your disgusting body back to the stables. If I ever hear you repeating such evil slander about the Lady Guinevere, then freeman or not, I'll lash you until there isn't a piece of whole skin left on your body. If she looks even a scum like you, if she looks even to scum like you as if she's seen a vision, maybe she has. Do you think the saints appear to your kind? Now get back to work and never let me see you here in the house again. Do you understand?" The horseman was a head taller than Penserna and 20 years younger, but he nodded and left as if an entire army were chasing him. That night he stole one of the best horses and escaped. Leodegrance received the news with indifference. "He won't get far. Our mark is on the horse. No one will believe we gave it to him, and in the meantime we have others." Penserna shook his head. The Leodegrance of old would have gone out after the man and brought him back tied face down over the horse's tail. He wondered if he should mention the accusations the man had made. No, of course, there was no truth in them, and Leodegrance and Gwynland had enough just now. Still, it might not be a bad idea to send someone out after her, just to be sure she was safe. Whom could she send? Kate? No, it might start more gossip if he were seen sneaking out after her, and tongues were ever ready to spread such tales. Who then? A woman. It really wasn't dangerous in the immediate area, but not many of the servants were left, and none could really be spared for that many hours. Of course, Rihanna. It was so easy to forget her. She hardly ever spoke. He had trouble remembering that she was still about the house, and the only fosterling who had insisted upon remaining. It probably wasn't good for her to do so. The house was too glum these days. She really hadn't been looking well lately. This was no place for a young girl now, not even Guinevere, really. That thought passed through his head with a shock. No, it wasn't a good place for Guinevere now, but who could imagine her anywhere else? One might as well uproot the tree by the gate. Pincerned dismissed the whole idea. Accordingly, the next day, when Guinevere set out, Rihanna followed her. She took a basket with her as an excuse if noticed, but no one questioned her. Rihanna was the sort of person who was easily overlooked. She was 17 and had a well-developed body for her age. The long, slender legs... long, slender legs. But her face was still that of a child, and she had a way of staring wistfully at the world around her that discouraged most of the men in her class. They preferred their women round and flirtatious, at least for enjoying before their marriages were arranged. Mark had commented on her figure, but it had never occurred to him to go further than that. Her meekness made him nervous. Rihanna was more than fashionably pale. Her skin was almost greenish-white, and she panted a bit as she hurried to keep up with Guinevere without being seen. Occasionally, Guinevere would break into a run and leave Rihanna far behind. Rihanna went as far as she could, but she knew she couldn't keep up, and was sure she would lose her. She had not wanted the job of spy, but it hadn't occurred to her to refuse. Every time someone approached her these days, she trembled for fear they would insist she return home. She couldn't go home, not now, and yet she didn't have any idea of what she would do. Like the rest of the house, she could only think one day ahead, no more. But the day for a decision was nearing for her. Guinevere had disappeared into a tangle of vines and branches. Rihanna waited a minute and then followed her. The growth was very thick. It was impossible to see far ahead. Struggling to remove the vines caught in her hair, she didn't stop quickly enough to the other side and nearly stumbled over the two of them. The unicorn started and rose to its feet. Guinevere looked up. "It's all right," she said lazily. "It's only Rihanna. She won't hurt you. Let her touch you, too." But the beautiful creature only shook its mane and backed away from her, vanishing among the trees. "Wait," Guinevere called. "Come back. It's only Rihanna." Rihanna grabbed her arm. "Don't bother, Guinevere. It can't come back for me. It won't let me come near it." Then she sank to the ground, coughing and weeping bitterly. "Rihanna," Guinevere put her arms around her. "Don't cry so. You are the only one after me who has seen him. How many people do even that? I suppose he is only my unicorn, perhaps. You'll meet one someday." "Don't be ridiculous." Rihanna pushed her away. "A unicorn can only be tamed by a virgin. Everyone knows that. Now go away and leave me alone." She tried to raise to her feet and stumble away, but went only a few steps before she reeled dizzily and grasped at a tree to support her. Guinevere ran after her and held her up. "Rihanna, what's the matter with you?" she cried. "Why are you out here? I have never seen you this way. You must be ill. Here, let me help you." "No, don't bother," Rihanna said fiercely. "I'm not ill. I'm wicked. I'm going to have a baby, and soon everyone will know. My family will disown me, and yours will throw me out, and I'll probably die and go to hell." She sat down again and cried and coughed some more. The running had worn her out completely, and she looked terrible. Guinevere sat beside her, wanting to help, but not having any idea of where to begin. "But I don't understand, Rihanna. How could this happen?" Guinevere, don't you know anything? "Not about babies. No one ever told me, and I never thought to ask." Even in her misery, Rihanna smiled. "No, I suppose no one would." The thought of someone settling down with Guinevere and explaining sex to her was ludicrous. Still, she would very likely be married someday. "Well, it's no matter. I have no husband, and there is but one road open to me." Her voice shook. "But I am weak and afraid. Oh, I wish I had a unicorn." "Babies must have fathers. I know that much. Isn't that so? Where is this Where is this person, Rihanna? If he became your husband, then everything would be all right. He isn't unsuited to us, is he? Rihanna flushed. Where would I meet anyone unsuited, Guinevere? You are amazing. Your brother Matthew is the father, and in case you have forgotten, he is dead. I can't marry, he can't marry me now. At first, I was so glad we had those few times together. He came back in the spring just to see me, but now I only feel sick and ashamed, and wish we had waited until he asked my parents, so we could be properly married. Her voice drifted off. It didn't matter if Guinevere listened or not. I had such dreams. Our beautiful villa high in the mountains. I knew just where it would be, away from Saxons, Irish, and Picts, and away from all those noisy, drunken soldiers. Just the two of us. I told him about it, and he laughed and said it would be a fine place to come back to. We could raise horses, and when he was old, they could be the dowries for our daughters. And now there is nothing left of him. Nothing but this, she felt her stomach, and this, she held out her hand. On the middle finger was a signet ring. Guinevere smiled. I know that. Grandmother gave it to Matthew because he was the oldest, and he would wear it even though it was a woman's ring, because he loved her so much. He gave it to you? How he must have loved you then, Rihanna. You should go to Mother and explain it to her. Rihanna stiffened at once. No, how can I do that? She would only think me wicked. She would say I was trying to please her for mercy, to push myself into the family and cover my shame. Rihanna, Guinevere was angry. You know my mother. How can you say such things of her? She raised you, loved you. She will know what to do. What do you want instead? To kill yourself? She started. No, or I would have already. But I think it's the only honorable thing for me to do. I don't know what you're talking about. It is true that nobody ever explains these things to me. Perhaps I should ask, but I do know that my brother is no longer alive except for that part of him living inside of you. Yet, you want to destroy that too? I can see no honor in that, and I don't think Mother would either. She added more humbly, I don't know or understand how you feel. I don't know much about people at all, but Mother does, and I think we should go to her now, please. Rihanna's eyes lit up like a sunrise. It was what she had wanted all along, but had been too timid to do. Will you come with me? Yes, but you must explain to her. I don't know how. And Rihanna, promise me that you won't tell anyone about my friend. The wistful look returned to Rihanna's eyes. No, it belongs to you. I know what they would do with it. You are right. Even to have seen such a thing is more than I ever dreamed of. I'm really a very ordinary person. When I found that Matthew loved me, I felt that was really nothing more that life could give me. It is not the same, I know, but you may say you have another family now, too. Guinevere held out her arms to embrace her sister. In the silent moment, perhaps all things mythical and true would have welcomed them. The golden feeling lasted for Rihanna until she came to Gwendolyn's door. Go in first, Guinevere. I can't. My feet won't move. No, we'll go in together. Here, take my arm. It was late afternoon, and Gwendolyn had, for once, run out of things to do. She slumped in her chair, staring out the window at the patterns of morning glory vines made across the glass. She resolved to think of nothing rather than the darkness that pursued her. But thinking of nothing only let in the darkness, and she was beginning to slip into despair. Seeing her like that, this frightened Guinevere, as it had so often in the past weeks. But Rihanna only felt pity and understanding. Didn't she herself feel the same sorrow? She went to Gwendolyn and knelt at her feet, resting her head on the older woman's knee. Guinevere came with her, feeling out the place. She sat on a stool nearby. Absently, Gwendolyn patted Rihanna's face. Mother, Gwendolyn focused her eyes. Rihanna wants to speak with you. She has something to tell you. I think something from Matthew, a gift. She could not find the words. Gwendolyn had roused herself and was looking at Rihanna intently. Guinevere knew she would not be missed, so she slipped away, glad to be apart from such confusing and deep emotions. Rihanna lifted her face. It was streaked with tears. My lady, please forgive me. I truly loved him, and we thought it would not anger you when you learned we wanted to wed. Gwendolyn regarded her with a practiced eye, her pallor contrasting with her full breast and slightly rounded stomach. She couldn't believe it. Leodegrance had made some comment that Matthew seemed much taken with the child, but then she noticed the ring. Her whole manner changed as she swept Riona up in her arms, laughing and crying at once. "Oh, my daughter, my dear, I cannot thank you enough. You poor lamb. Don't you see? He is not dead at all. You have brought him back to life. My husband will be so relieved." Riona wasn't prepared for hysteria from the dignified Lady Gwendolyn, but being always close to tears herself, these days, she clasped Gwendolyn's hand and sobbed too. With all the weeping, there had rarely been two happier women. Gwendolyn quickly composed herself, slightly ashamed of such a wild outburst. She had had enough of those, but she continued to rejoice, not only for this promise of a continuation of Matthew's life, and therefore her own, but also because she now had something concrete to plan for and worry about. It would keep her busy and looking forward. It would keep her living. Grasping the problem at once, she immediately gave all her attention to it. First, she had to calm Riona's fears. "You should have come to me at once, my dear. I know what you thought, but you needn't believe that parents are so blind. We saw the way you and my son looked at each other, and I know Matthew never raced from one end of the island to the other just to spend a week with me. We had already given thought to suggesting a marriage between you two. I even mentioned it to your mother in my last letter to her. So you see, no one will be very surprised to hear that you were married when he left last spring. Of course, he didn't say anything then because we planned a formal wedding and a settlement of dowry when he returned." She swallowed quickly and went on. As he didn't, we are, of course, overjoyed, and we ignored tradition and allowed you a few days together first. Poor dear, you didn't have much more than that, did you?" Riona was starting to tremble and... Riona was still trembling and crying. Why couldn't she stop crying lately? "I thought I was afraid you would think I was lying, that I wanted a place that wasn't mine." We're going to stop it here. This is really an interesting part, and I want to make sure that we get it all in. We are doing this. We've been reading from Guinevere by Sharan Newman. This book is still available for sale, along with the sequel, The Chessboard Queen, and Guinevere Evermore. And they are available still at the big retailers, I'm sure. Anyways, if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe, ring the bell so you know when I upload, and if you support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.